We're going to just wait a little bit for our facilitators to join us. So please stay tuned. This is my cat Toast. Feel free to just stare at him in the process. All right, I see one of our facilitators starting. For facilitators joining us, Chinasa and Rizwana, you could just ask to share audio and video to join. Hi. Hello. Chinasa or Chinaza?
Chinaza.
Chinaza. Okay, cool. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Amazing. We're gonna wait for your colleague, and then we will get started with a little bit of intro, get this party started. We're really excited to have you all talk to us about intersectionality.
I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little, some discussion. We'll be using mostly like kind of chat features. Feel free to use like people will be just throwing their thoughts in the chat. Some questions coming in Q&A. So yeah.
Nice.
Let's see.
Let's see if I can send her a message.
This is Toast. Toast, you're gonna learn about intersectionality today? Like, nah, I'm good. I'm already intersectional because I'm just intersectional color-wise. No, that's just that.
No, totally love it. I'm also a cat mom, so
Really?
sharing that identity.
Oh, yes, we definitely do. I mean, like, I'm not sure if I'm a cat mom or a dog mom. I don't know what's up. All right, whatever. Okay.
He's having the best time over there in the chair.
Yeah, he meows, and then I'm like, "Are you upset?" And I'm like, "Nah, you're not upset." Thank you, Aiden. Toast living his best life. Yes. How's your day been?
It's been good. It's been pretty good. Went to work. Now I'm here.
Yeah.
How's your day been?
It's been good. It's been more peaceful than I anticipated. Usually I wake up and I'm like, all right, let's go. And then I'm like, no, wait, actually though, I'm gonna make pancakes.
Nice.
I made pancakes this morning. I made pancakes and I mean, they were great.
I mean, it's always a great day when you start with pancakes.
I know. Last night I went to sleep and I was like, I want pancakes tomorrow. And then I was like, all right, yes. And I went to sleep and I woke up and I was like, hell yeah.
Follow through. That's great.
Yeah. I wake up just, yeah. So, no, but I get a little wild with mine. I'm gonna briefly read a little bit about what kind of pancakes. Well, here's the thing. So someone taught me how to make pancakes from scratch, but I'm fine with my mom. All right, I just add water, but then to make me feel kind of like chill, make me feel like I'm giving my body a little bit more, I throw in chia seeds and flax seeds. And then, and then I'm like, oh, protein, whatever.
That's great. That definitely sounds very.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit of things. So, first of all, y'all, welcome to this space. You said, Chinaza, you hit up Rezwana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she'll be coming in anytime soon.
She's actually in right now.
Oh, she is.
Obviously, see her name. Yeah.
Oh, I see you, Rizwana. Come join us. You can just click share video and audio. Wait. Oh.
There we go.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome, Rizwana. Amazing. All right. So, hello and welcome everyone to the Women in STEM Intersectionality session. But before we get started in the cool conversation, here are some guidelines to follow at all times. Exercise consideration and respect in your speech and actions. We're all adults here. Alert conference staff if you notice a dangerous situation, someone in distress, or the violations of our code of conduct. A little bit. Yeah. Also, thank you for coming. My name is Elia. I'm on the organizing committee, second year student. They, she pronouns. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing. We have here Naza Obama. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry. And Rizwana Islam. We are from the OSTEM organization here. So a little bit about OSTEM. OSTEM is an organization dedicated to supporting LGBTQIA+ students and professionals in STEM as part of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility at OSTEM. They're committed to supporting LGBTQIA+ individuals, and I've heard the term alphabet mafia, which I prefer a bit more, but that's just me, who have intersecting identities. During this interactive workshop, attendees will learn about OSTEM, intersectionality, and various LGBTQ+ terms, along with the space to discuss stigma and microaggressions. This workshop will close with a debrief and open Q&A. Okay, and with that, y'all can take it away.
That is
Awesome.
okay. That should work.
Perfect.
Tired.
I think so. I think so.
Okay. Well, now I'm not, so we can get. So as mentioned before, we are from OSTEM. Stands for Out in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, and we're going to introduce you all to an intersectionality workshop today.
I think we just lost Shanaza.
Okay. In that case, while comes back at some point, but before we start, just some ground rules again. Please share as much as you're comfortable with. We don't want to feel like anyone is forced to share, but we definitely encourage people to share their experiences and thoughts. Give to add anything you'd like to. Email us if you'd like to talk after
Hello?
this session. Shanaza, are you back?
Oh my gosh.
We can hear you, Shanaza.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, okay. Okay, I can't see the presentation though, so I'm not sure what page we're on. My internet just went out.
We just
so
went over ground rules.
Let's see. Can everyone see the screen? The slides? Okay, awesome. Okay, so it's just me. Wow, this is great. Are we on the first page, the STEM and LGBTQ slide page? Okay, okay, I'm just gonna refresh.
Sorry, that screaming child is not mine.
Okay, I just refreshed it and I can see the slides. Wow, this was so difficult. I'm so sorry. Okay. I assume it's my turn to introduce myself. I'm Chinaza Abona. I use she, her pronouns. I am the social coordinator for the Women Affinity Group in OSTEM, part of the IDEA committee. And during the day, I am a research engineer for the Institute for Electronics and Nanotechnology at Georgia Tech. And part of my identities identify as bisexual. If you were here early, you heard me say I identify as a cat mom, identify as an avid book reader, a traveler when it's not COVID. avid Netflix watcher, or really any subscription. I subscribe to all of them. And yeah, so those are like some of my identities. And I'm not sure if Rizwana, did you have a chance to introduce yourself already?
I did not.
There you go.
Okay, so you can hear
yes.
me. But yeah, okay. I'm Rizwana Islam. I use she, her pronouns. I serve as the social coordinator for race and ethnicity affinity group, also under the IDEA committee. That's my OSTEM email. If you have any other like questions or want to kind of follow up, please email that. Outside of that, I am undergrad at University of Arizona, doing double majors in public health and creative writing with double minors in marine sciences and food and nutrition systems. I am not a cat mom. I am a guinea pig parent. I have a little guinea pig named Louie. And I'm also, outside of that, I consider myself a writer, artist. I really like nature and the outdoors. And I'm also a huge nerd with like affinity for like K-pop and anime and all things like that. So, as I think, is there feedback? I think I can hear.
One person's talking, the other one's muted, so there's no echoing. If that's okay.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Again, we stand for algorithms, science, technology, and mathematics. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting LGBTQIA+ students. It's part of the Diversity, Inclusion, Accessibility Committee, committed to supporting LGBTQ identity. Do you have STEM? We have an asexual / aromantic affinity group. We have the disability affinity group. We have an inquiry affinity group, which is for people who are religious. We have middle sexualities. We have race and we have trans and non-binary, and then we also have the women affinity group, which Shanaza runs. And if you would like to get more involved with OSTEM, we Discord link right here. You can join us and
Yay! So I was muted. Now it's time for our Guess the Pride Flag activity. And we are going to use the chat here. So feel free to engage with us in the chat. And so if you go to the next slide, Rizwana, please. So who knows what this flag is? Feel free to use the chat. Use the chat to. I love it. Daniela came in strong to engage with us. Let's see how many people agree with Daniela that it's B. Yay, we have one more B. One more B. Woohoo, everyone. Love it, love it. Be like they. That's great. That's a great response. Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. It is a 100% consensus here. And also, some of you may already be familiar with these terms, and we may be just going through some stuff that you may be already familiar with. So that's, know that there. But yes, you were correct. It was B, the transgender flag. And a transgender person is someone whose gender identity is different from the sex assigned at birth. And if you're also interested in the other flags, we also have the flags for, Rizwana, if you could say next slide, please, for the lesbian and pansexual groups as well. And so lesbians are female identified people who are attracted to other female identified people, and this is the flag. And a pansexual person is a person who is attracted to all genders, regardless of sex or gender. And that's the pansexual flag. And so Rosanna can take it from here.
Yeah, so this is, we're going to talk, my brain, like, 1 second to reboot. Wondering if any flag is. You can feel free to put stuff in the chat as well. Is it pride? So we have pride. So a lot of these seems to be progress pride as our main answer. Not sure valid. So it is actually Philadelphia pride. So Philadelphia pride was actually it be designed by a marketing firm. Black and brown. Our second one, for the other two, pride, our original pride flag is the one on the left. It's not the original, but this is typically the pride flag that you're going to be seeing when you think about like pride and the rainbow flag. And then the second one on the right is the progress pride flag. So that is designed to include, you know, the black stripe and brown for people of color, as well as the trans. So our next, this one. Definitely not ace. B, okay, we have a B, B. So it looks like intersex. Easier one. So it looks like people are use the answer, and you would be right. So this is the intersex flag. Intersex refers to any intention of having physical sex markers, either male or female. Medicine, you know, is a very binary thing, just as and confusing. So this is also the non to a person as you that's a very large term, and a lot of different identities can be included within non-binary. There's no right way or wrong way to be non-binary. And then the second is the asexual flag. So this refers to a person who experiences little to no sexual attraction. Within that, of course, you have a lot of other different identities.
Awesome. And this brings us to intersectionality. So intersectionality, as defined here by the Oxford Dictionary, is the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating, overlapping, and into systems of discrimination or advantage. And that's the Oxford definition. As we know, intersectionality can also expand beyond race, class, and gender to include a whole bunch of different intersections as displayed by this social identity wheel here. But it's important to also note that intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And she used it to describe the intertwined impacts of racism and sexism, specifically for Black women, and it umbrellaed from there. And so Rizwana is going to take you through this activity.
So we're going to do a quick activity. So minutes, I want you all to think about and what your social identity wheel looks like. So the picture on sample this with like boxes for national origin, race. Write it down if you would like. We can talk a little bit about it. So I'll give y'all some time. And so there isn't this awkward silence. We're going to listen to Montero, Bill X.
Yes to the song. Yes to the song.
Muted. Okay, I'm so sorry. I assume she's also having technical difficulties. Let me take us to the page while we wait for, then we can give like 2 minutes for her to come back. And then, There we go.
Sorry about that. So mute this anymore. Can people hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Come on, PowerPoint. So while we're waiting for my PowerPoint to hopefully cooperate, I'd love to hear some thoughts of if you want to share any of your identities or identities that you feel like are important to you. In the chat if you would like, and I'm just read this aloud.
Wait, what did you say?
Can people not hear me again?
Sorry, it came in and out a little bit.
If my PowerPoint is finally working. Yeah, if you want to share any of that are important or that you want to talk about, you can put them in the chat or you can say them out loud by unmuting yourself. It's up to you. I know, to encourage y'all, I can start. So one identity that I feel really strongly about is that I'm Muslim, which for my last name is usually pretty obvious, but I know that's personally like a really important identity to me, given like everything that's going on in the world right now. Starting on Monday, actually. So I'm very excited, and personally, that's like an identity that's really important to me. Anyone want to share everything? It's either Monday or Tuesday. I will be honest, I don't know. Ramadan starts when my mom tells me it does. So, okay. So, feel strongly, I think, Nelia? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. They feel strongly about education, non-binary, Afro-Caribbean. Wonderful. Anyone else have stuff that they want to share? You can also say it out loud if you'd like.
Sarah.
Sarah, so ethnicity, first language, gender, but also like all of these very relatable. Yes, I feel that. Vera, Russian, that's awesome. Maggie, education, Hispanic, gender. Anyone else? Gender, education from Hayden. Daniela, gender, ethnicity, national origin. So these are all super great. If you want to, like, please continue sending those in the chat. So I write all of these identity pairs and how we experience the world. So now we're going to talk a little bit about which of these identities give privilege.
Nice. So we're going to talk a little bit about privilege in terms of power, privilege, and oppression. And so I have this little graphic here from a paper, actually, that's like your privilege wheel, and it's by no means extensive, and I'm pretty sure it's a relatively old paper. So, but like these are just some things to think about, like when you're thinking about privilege. And so privilege refers to often unconscious and unearned social power, and so basically, you get access to resources, advantage, influences over others, and social position based on what cultural groups that you're a member of. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Okay, awesome. So power, there's two fundamental types of power. One, okay. One is the ability to dominate or control people and things. And this power rests on a relative rank or privilege, and the privilege of being at the top. It reflects a supremacist way of thinking, which is like related to scarcity consciousness or the belief that the world holds limited supplies of the things that we want. An alternative type of power is liberatory power, which is the ability to create what we want, which stems from an abundance consciousness. And then when you think of oppression, there's actually a graphic, and we're going to come back to the slide, but Rizwana, could you please go to the next slide real quick? Yeah, so there's the 4 eyes of oppression, and for the purposes of like this group, I mean, yes, there's ideological, which is institutional, which are a little bit more umbrella, you know, more, I guess, more external. So I'm going to focus more on the interpersonal and internalized forms of oppression. And so interpersonal oppression is the idea that one group is better than the other and has the right to control the other. And that kind of thinking gets structured into our institutions, which then gives permission and reinforcement for individual members to personally mistreat individuals in the oppressed group. And so many people in dominant group are not consciously oppressive, but oftentimes like the people that are have internalized negative messages about other groups, and they consider their attitudes towards those other groups normal. And then when you think about internalized oppression, which is the 4th way that oppression works, is within the groups of people who suffer the most from the mistreatment. So oppressed people internalize inferiority. Oh my gosh, I can't speak English. They see it reflected in institutions. They experience the mistreatment interpersonally from members of the dominant group, and then they eventually come to internalize the negative messages about themselves. So if we go back to our privilege wheel and we think about our power, privilege, and oppression, so if I think about myself personally, we have power and privilege. We have power and privilege in lots of different spaces. It looks differently in different spaces. And so like, for example, in this space, I have power and privilege as I'm giving, you know, leading this discussion and sharing information with you. There are other spaces in which I'm, you know, don't have as much power or privilege, or and so the idea is to think about how can we use our privilege and power to help people that are oppressed. So if you think about your privilege, what are, and for the rest of the questions, so to the previous slide, sorry for a quick second. What identities do you think give you the most privileges? What identities, yeah. So let's, because we can start with that. What identities do you think give you the most privileges? And then what identities do you think give you the most disadvantages? And then we can talk about a little bit about how we can use our advantage, privilege to help people who are feeling the opposite end of that. Exactly, it depends, yeah. It does depend on the environment. Let's see, for, I guess, so if we go back to the privilege wheel. Yes. Yeah, so I guess maybe let's think about the spaces in which we most occupy, perhaps. I don't know if that's a good way to narrow it down, but But yeah, so Daniela mentioned, as an educator, being a female science teacher really affords me the privilege of taking space. I love that, yeah. For me also, it's weird because, so in my job, I'm the only woman in staff, and I'm the only Black woman in staff. And so there are some times when I have like, I feel like I might have like privilege in certain instances. And then there's obviously opportunities and times when I feel like I am being oppressed in those situations. But then the onus is to think about when I do have privilege. For a long time, I was the only mechanical engineer on staff, and so I had authority when, for example, when it comes to like designs, and thinking about like structural reinforcements and improvements that we could make to our tools. And like we had a woman who was like an intern that was like struggling. And so in that position, I was able to kind of help her to like, I guess, be more, no, I don't want to be like, help her feel empowered, you know, in the space. And as well as help my coworkers to see her in a more favorable light. But yeah, Anelia, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Ethnicity, below the equator, I feel like an anamorph. I can choose to be from anywhere, and above the equator, things get weird real fast. Yeah, that's really interesting. And that like can be very hard to navigate, right? And so yeah, so this graph is just to help you think about like what areas do you and if you just think about yourself just in general, you can like map out your graph and see like, oh, like do I generally have like more privilege, I guess societally? Do I generally have less privilege? And in these areas where I have privilege, how can I use my privilege to help people who are less privileged than I am? So, you know, I would fall as like, I'm a feminine presenting woman, and I identify as a woman. So, you know, cis woman, and that gives me privilege, right? And so thinking about how can I help people who are non-cis, how can I help trans women or non-binary people to in spaces where I have power, you know, and privilege. So we can move on from here, or does anybody have anything they want to, any thoughts on this, on the privilege map, on the oppression, little graphic, any additional thoughts before we move on to Rizwana talking about stigma? Mm-hmm. 1 minute. Yay, thank you, Maggie. Yeah, I saw this graph at like another conference and I was like, you have to send this to me. Sorry, Rizwana.
Can people hear me? Okay, so yes. Muting is, it's been a whole, like, I'm on the struggle bus. So now that we've talked a little bit about privilege and the advantages or disadvantages it gives you, we can talk a little bit about stigma and what it is. Regressions. Direct of a marginalized. Now, I don't know about all of you, but that definition for stigma sounds like a bunch of nonsense. Like when you just, it's correct, but also a mark of disgrace associated with particular circumstance, quality, or person. I feel like in terms of like stigma that isn't, there's a lot it misses out on in terms of like, what does this actually mean? What is it actually saying? So for stigma, right, one of the most important things that we have to remember is it can be, and with microaggressions as well, stigma and microaggressions don't necessarily come with negative intentions. I think obviously in social justice spaces, when we talk about stigma and we talk about microaggressions, there are associated negative things and they can be harmful. But at the same time, right, people who perpetuate these things are not necessarily doing it on purpose. Talking a little bit about stigma, I personally, I have bipolar disorder, and I talk a lot about stigma in terms of like mental health and working. I also I work with kids in mental health, and stigma is something we talk a lot about. So stigma is the experience of someone or feeling like you're going through a different experience, a negative different experience than the people around you due to an identity of yours or something about you that is uniquely you. So, feeling isolated or shunned because of that, that is really kind of, what stigma is. And stigma can exist against all different types of people. It can be perpetuated. The stigmas people have about certain identities can be very much related to, your own personal background, your own social background, right? The type of people you grew up with, what you were taught as a child. So a lot of the things around stigma and microaggressions, a lot of it has to do with unlearning the stuff that you were probably taught as a child or growing up. Because we're all taught stigmas, we're all taught microaggressions, and part of social justice and part of continuing this work, it's making spaces more equitable, is unlearning and educating yourself. And sometimes that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to unlearn something, but I think it's definitely worth the effort. And for microaggressions, so again, it's defined as a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance for indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. So I know microaggressions is also something that is not always mentioned, but obviously, right, these things can still have a really huge impact. It might be an offhanded comment or a joke that when you say it, you forget about it, you don't even remember it happens, but it's something that sticks with you. I'm going to use myself as an example again. I'm in a sorority, and we are we're a social, we're LGBTQA sorority, and at a point in time, we were a very small sorority. I was the only member of color within the group. And I also did a lot of work for the sorority. And I remember I was walking to class one day, and one of my sorority siblings was we just held elections, and I had 3 different positions. My sorority sibling made the joke of Rosemary, you're so important to this organization, right? You take on so many different roles. And I was like, oh, thanks. They're also, you're our token person of color. And I remember hearing that, and any happiness or pride I had about getting elected into these positions immediately just dropped. And all I could think about was the fact that they said that. And that was 3 years ago. And I still remember it clear as day hearing them say that. And immediately after, they were oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it like that. And I'm no, it's fine. It was not fine. But they said the same person made the exact same comment again in another meeting. And I remember being there and everyone just kind of laughed. I remember sitting there also being is that how they see me? Right? Is that the only reason that people actually want me here? Because I do a lot of work and I'm the token person of color? Is that what my worth is? And it's something that I obsessed over for such a long time. The person who said it does not remember it. They vaguely remember it. It was just a comment. But for me, it's something that really impacted me. So I think the thing with microaggressions is also, right, you have to be careful. It's not that you have to be careful about what you say, it's that, recognize the intention, the impact that your words can have. And sometimes, even if you didn't necessarily mean anything negative of it, right, those words can still have a really profound impact on someone, and really affect the way that someone's going through their life or the way they see themselves. So I wanted to kind of open it up in case anyone else wanted to talk about their experiences with microaggressions or stigma, some experiences you might have had, or whatnot. Yeah, everyone left. It was all white people, so.
Yeah, it's so funny because when I was in undergrad, I was actually also in a predominantly white sorority, and for like a couple of years, and there were only like 3 Black girls out of 200 women in the sorority, and we were the most diverse sorority on campus, and it was something that we were very proud of. And the fact that and then I remember one day, one of my sorority sisters was drunk, and she and it was an honest mistake, but she called me by the other person, one of the other Black women's names. And I was like, first of all, we don't look anything alike. Our names do not sound alike. There's only 3 of us. You could learn it's so easy. So yeah. I still remember it to this day. That was several years ago. Yeah.
That's sorority life.
Yeah. I remember I was in Dominican Republic, and I was on an ATV, and the acceleration belt broke, and so I had to pull off the highway with a friend of mine, and we needed to get help. But this is in the boondocks. You're in the campo. You're not in the city where you might get, some more urban folks. It's no. So there are these 2 guys walking down the street, and I was like, hey, can you help us? Can you help me? And they just look at each other. And I recognize that I don't even know how to describe myself as androgynous. And they were just what is that to me, to each other? They weren't even talking to me, actually. They weren't even addressing my question, but they just looked at me and then looked at each other what is that? Is that a girl or a boy? And I remember being a girl, and then I got offended. And years later, I'm I did my job.
I remember in high school, I looked very androgynous, and one time I was like, hey, Rosanna, can I ask you a question? I'm like, yeah, sure. He's like, please don't punch me. Or are you a boy or a girl? It was to this day, it's one of the fun gotten, because it was prefaced by please don't punch me. And I didn't answer that laugh. It was a very if there's anything to define who I was as a person in high school, it's that interaction. So again, if people want to continue sharing, so for stigma and microaggressions, right? Pick your battles. Your mental health is important. Taking care of yourself is important. Sometimes it's just not worth it. If there's some people that, right? Or if you're really was okay, if they're well, why are you attacking me? Right? There's some people that it's just not worth the effort. It's not worth the emotional weight that you're going to take on. Learning to draw boundaries as well, right? Someone being your friend or someone you're being close with doesn't mean that that stuff is okay, right? And then also you can find support in employee resource groups, clubs, allies, OSTEM. People around you can be a really So
awesome. And this is our last slide. And I'm just going to take a second here to also acknowledge some of the comments that have been coming through the chat of like, that definitely is really weird, Daniela, that somebody, like, I imagine it would feel really weird that someone would just start guessing all, like trying to guess your last name. Like, who does that? That's what? And yeah, no, it definitely would also suck being like mistaken for the only other female Filipino person. Scare flashbacks, Maggie. Sorry, just reading through all the comments here. And yeah, no, that also really sucks, Vera. Like, that's not a funny joke. I imagine it would get really old after 7 years. But yeah, to go through this last slide on allyship, you know, we've talked a little bit about intersectionality. We've talked about stigma and microaggressions and talked about power, privilege, and oppression. And so we're just going to end it here on allyship and how to be an ally and what allyship is. Because just going back to the thing of how can we use our power and privilege to help those of us who are less privileged than us in the spaces that we occupy whenever we occupy those spaces. And so allyship is a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability with marginalized individuals and or groups of people. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, as you see here, it's a lifelong process of building trust. And sometimes, like, I do want to give this caveat here of like, sometimes I also feel like I've been guilty of this where like I've rushed into spaces like wanting to be an ally sometimes. And then like you might get, I've gotten called out for something before of like, oh, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. Like, so for example, in public health spaces, you like my partner works in public health. And so she like person-centered language, talking about person-centered language. And so you want to be like, you know, person with a disability. And so like I was on Twitter or whatever, and I was like, you know, like whatever, person with a disability, whatever. And then like a couple or disabled people like responded to my tweet being like, hey, like we actually prefer to use disabled people, like person with disability is like for legal, you know, just like schooled me on like, this is like legal talk or whatever. And like, it's not like personable language and all of that stuff. But basically I had to also like be like, hey, like get comfortable with being uncomfortable here. Like you definitely don't know. Like, I was like, oh, thank you for teaching me this. I would not have known this without showing my ass. Excuse me. Basically, the first step in allyship is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable process. It's a lifelong process. Educate yourself on issues and don't be afraid to change your mind. You again, like we're just gonna keep harping on this throughout the whole presentation, but using your privilege for people who can't or don't have the same ability to. If you see spaces or opportunities for you to use your privilege, I mean, it's better to lead with questions. I mean, I wouldn't make assumptions on like, I feel like also assuming how your privilege is best, how you can best help someone can also blow back. And so I think it's better to lead by asking questions and asking what people need or asking what is the best way to approach a situation rather than just making an assumption and running into the situation. So using your privilege with questions and, you know, and humility and showing up. The important thing to remember is that allyship, ally is a verb and not a noun. I mean, it technically is also a noun, but you know, it's also a verb. So yeah, and that brings us to the end of the presentation with 5 minutes to spare. And so we have some time for Q&A. Feel free to use the chat or the Q&A box thing. But thank you for having us. This is great.
Yes. Yes. If this was in person, I would say give it up for Chinaza and Rizwana. We will hear some virtual claps. Oh yeah, we got some stuff in the chat. We got a lot of thank yous. We got some applause. We got a virtual applause from Sarah. Thank you. Clap for Maggie. All right. Lit. Questions, comments, concerns. How about y'all unmute yourselves if you want to speak? Or I guess the chat's an option too. I got so many questions. I'm just this point that you mentioned earlier related to the scarcity consciousness. I wonder, just this is more like, I wonder how much of this is embedded in us from a young age, that there's this permeates into several facets of our lives, right? Like even thinking about attachment styles and relationships, it's like this is a lot of where like fear comes from, and like this idea of scarcity, of like finding a partner, finding whatever. And like this, the intersection of how scarcity, this like notion, I've been reading a lot about attachment theory. I don't know. And so I just connected this because I was like, wow, like the scarcity consciousness also arises in privilege and the intersection of our identities. Because it's like, oh yeah, like you talked about this power. And I just like, I guess this is like part stream of consciousness, part like also like questioning that, like, how do you switch over to like an abundance consciousness now? To do that switch, to practice that, I don't even know if it's like a swap, because I can imagine it's like a gradual transition, you know, like what kind of steps can we be doing to kind of just like unlearn the scarcity, this notion of scarcity that's just so wrong.
No, yes, that is such a great question. That's such a great question. And honestly, the first thing I thought of when I thought about how to respond to that question is like this, you know, have you seen those little graphs of like where that they say like healing isn't linear, and it's like a curve thing that has lots of hills and valleys. I imagine that's what this journey is. It's going to be lots of hills, lots of valleys, lots of stumbling. Like, I don't imagine anybody just wakes up and they're like, oh, I have an abundance mindset, and like, that's just it. Like, it would be really great if it just worked that way. But I imagine it's like deconstructing anything, you know, like, that process of unlearning, being able to recognize, I imagine it has to start with knowing yourself. You have to put that work into like knowing yourself, knowing your family, knowing your culture, knowing like what influences you, and then you can be able to start recognizing the areas and opportunities in your life where you display scarcity, because you're very right. Scarcity permeates in lots of different areas of our life. It's like all facets of our life. And like I didn't know this. So I am Nigerian. I grew up in Nigeria, and I learned in like my relationship that I had a scarcity mindset surrounding food. And so basically I like get really mad about food sometimes. Like if like I feel like I'm not gonna have enough, or if I feel like I'm not gonna be fed, or something. And so it's like, yeah, and so I have to like be conscious about it and be like, hey, I can go to the store. I have like I have the opportunity to do this. I don't have to get extremely upset about this food being over now. I can make some more food. You know, like there's opportunities here for abundance. So yeah.
I know I personally think of it as I use like the mental spray bottle. Like, you know how you spray cats with like water when they're doing something bad?
No.
That, but for your
Oh yes. I just haven't done it yet because he's just such a good boy. But yeah.
So I saw this a lot in my own like personal relationship, where I was in a relationship that honestly I should have ended it a lot sooner, but I was like, they leave them, I'm never gonna find someone ever again. It was like this process of being like, no, like there's so many people in the world, like you're gonna be fine. Just like think about it, like do the math, like you're gonna be fine. And it was like,
yes,
time. It took literal months and like talking with other people for me to be like, okay, I can like do this and fall apart and I'll like be happy and I'll be okay. So it's literally like you're training yourself. Whatever you have, like, no, that's not right. This is what we know. I know this is how you feel, but right, let's like you begin to like correct. I don't say correct, but you begin to kind of just like change the way you think about things. And eventually it just becomes natural, where you're like, oh, what about this thing? Well, there's like 7 billion people in the world, so I'm gonna be fine.
the probability, this is where the STEM comes in, where we're like, well, that one bleep that I'm really attached to, because you know, oh, and I will say this intersection and the component of oppression, I think, has a high correlation to being in relationships that are really crappy, because there's all these things we need to unlearn. And what does society tell us? What does Western society tell us? And then we're coming in from more like underprivileged areas that we're like, okay, yeah, sure, woo! Yeah, then you gotta unlearn all that crap, you know. I'm still unlearning, man. But I hear you. I think there's a lot of intersectionality in that area too, and it's crazy.
Definitely is. And I would say unlearning is also a lifelong process. So.
Mm-hmm. I really hope it is 5:01, go to 5:02. So I just want to close out here. If anyone has any burning questions, please throw it in the chat. But if not, thank you. Thank you so much, Janaza and Rizwana. OSTEM, everyone, thank you so much for the intersectionality discussion. I learned so much in this just brief hour. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us about intersectionality. And thank you all the participants for the chat. It was hot.
Thank you so much for having us. I will go back to like our first slide. So in case any of you all like want to get in contact with us, like our emails are available. Like feel free to like email us if you have any like questions, or if you just want to like join the conversation and keep it going. These are emails, and then you can also join the OSTEM Discord page and keep talking about all this really cool stuff. But thank you so much for having us.
A wonderful evening.
Yes. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.